Jonah lay face down, confused. The thing that pulled his attention at the moment was the powerful scent of grass in his nose. But the grass wasn't the only scent. There was another one present. Jonah didn't know how he could smell it, but he did. It was the smell of evil, in its purest form. Jonah rose to find himself on the crest of an extremely elevated hill. Another thing that he knew, once again, without knowing how he knew, was that the hill wasn't natural. It had been constructed, just for him. The hill overlooked a valley that was strangely barren. It was the complete opposite of his lush hilltop. It would have been entirely unremarkable except for some type of movement that Jonah could only make out in his peripheral vision. If he looked head-on, he saw nothing. What was the source of that movement? He tried to adjust his head so as to accommodate his peripheral vision a bit more when a bee stung him on the back of his arm. Immediately, he reached there, but saw nothing. And then he felt a sting on his neck. Ah! Jonah swatted at the area, but felt nothing there either. There was another sting on his back, and then the front of his neck. Through his pain and anguish, Jonah realized something. There were no bees. He diligently hunted around, but there were no bees, or any other stinging insects, for that matter, to see. Unless he was experiencing some kind of physical hallucination, the source of the issue was something else. It was when a sting caught the side of his head, which prompted him to jerk his head in discomfort, that he saw something. There was another abstractly elevated hill miles away to the west. It mirrored the one Jonah was on. It was even lush and green like his. But whereas his hill was only large enough to accommodate him, the other hill strained under the weight of dozens of people. Even though Jonah couldn't make out their faces, he knew that they were all focused on him with their left hands raised like engaged students in a classroom. The strange thing was the fact that their hands all gleamed specific colors, with the exception of 4 or 5, which had faded to black. Wait. 5 hands were pitch black dark. Jonah had experienced 5 stings. Were they the source of it then? He saw a hand go from green to black and felt a sting on his left arm. 3 more darkened. 3 more stings. Jonah felt like the stung portions of his body were on fire. He didn't know what to do about it. His mind went into panic mode, but he had no way to defend himself. What if all the hands went dark at the same time? Would the stings stop his heart or something like that? Jonah collapsed to his knees as 3 more hands went dark. The more this went on, the worse the stings felt. He didn't know how much more he could take. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a 3rd hill elevate from nowhere. It, like his, only contained 1 person. Jonah couldn't make him out, but the man didn't waste any time with attempts to be seen or recognized. He yanked the largest bow that Jonah had ever seen from his back, notched an arrow that gleamed gold, and fired directly into the crowd atop the hill. Through the haze of pain, Jonah wondered if the man had enough arrows to make a difference on that hill, but he needn't have worried. The archer's first arrow downed almost a half-dozen targets, but the man hadn't shot at random. He'd aimed for the people whose hands had gone dark. When they were attacked, the colors returned to their hands and Jonah's pain subsided. The archer sent 2 more gold-gleaming arrows into a crowd, but with the disarray it caused, it may as well have been a volley. The crowd was in utter chaos. They trampled over each other and fell to the ground. Some even threw projectile weapons at the 3rd hill, but with an ease that was almost frightening, the archer shot arrows at each weapon and derailed each one. Once he'd destroyed the weapons, he resumed shooting arrows into the crowd. The mass of people there was in true panic now, like Jonah had been earlier. He watched as many of them collapsed to their knees and many more fell flat on their backs. And then a final arrow flew from the archer's bow, and the last enemy fell. Jonah tore his eyes from the 2nd hill and looked over his savior in awe. "Who are you?" he called. "I mean, thanks and everything. I'm grateful and all that, but who are you?" The archer looked in Jonah's direction, but he was still too far away for Jonah to see his face.
"We've met before, you and I,"
he said. Jonah frowned. The voice definitely triggered something in his memory, but he didn't remember much else.
"I can do this no longer,"
said the archer. Why did it seem like it was more to himself than Jonah?
"Not this way. The lost spirits do all they can to survive."
It was in that moment that Jonah noticed it. It was as if his spectral sight decided to function on a delay. The movement on the barren land below the elevated hills were spirits.